If you want Colts talk all year long, you're in the right place.
Fires it upfield, caught over the middle. Michael Pitman Jr., there he goes! He's at the 40, he's at the 30, slips out of a tackle, 20, 10, 5, touchdown! Michael Pitman Jr. takes it 75 yards to the house. Big run, angling left, 40, he's at the 30, down the near sideline, 20, 15, 10, 5, touchdown! Jonathan Taylor, a 49-yard gallop to pay dirt.
In the Indiana Union Construction Industry radio studio, let's get the podcast started.
Official Colts Podcast time. You know it. It's Tuesday. We are back on YouTube and also streaming anywhere you download your podcasts on the Colts Audio Network, Colts.com, the Colts mobile app. Big week. Big week. Football.
We're back.
Returns. We are indeed back. The next time you see us probably in the flesh, we're going to be all sun-screened up, watching some football on the sidelines up at Grant Park, up in Westfield, because Colts training camp begins on Wednesday with report day, acclimation, orientation. They tell you where to go. They tell you where to eat, where to stay. And then, boom, that first practice is Thursday this week. For all the information on Colts training camp, practice times, where you can park, all the things you can do up at camp. It's very family oriented. Come one, come all. There's something up there for, Colts fans of all ages. Check it out online right now, Colts.com/camp. I'm Matt Taylor. Good to be with you. Larra Overton is here. JJ Stankevitz is here. Guys, Larra, for you, what are you most looking forward to about training camp? The fact that it's finally here, your anticipation level.
Oh, anticipation is huge. It's real football again, like you're actually getting into some live action in practice that you're going to really ramp up into those preseason games, which are going to be critical for a lot of guys to get those reps, in particular Anthony Richardson getting back out there, watching him. So, yeah, it's just the true football. I mean, of course, you get like the little the appetizer portion of the meal, if you will, like in the spring with OTAs and mini camp, but you really don't get the entree. Maybe a soup, maybe a small little salad, but yeah, like that. Now we're getting into some like meat and potatoes.
100%.
Okay, I'll counter that. I think if we're following this analogy, I think OTAs would be your appetizer.
Yeah.
Training camp would be your pre-dinner super salad that comes out. And then your entree is the regular season.
There you go. Yeah.
And then dessert,
there's your steak.
I guess, would be the postseason.
Yeah, I was just kind of saying, like, I put those in completely different categories. Like, I put basically camp and the preseason as like one, and then that's an entirely different, meal in and of itself.
We can debate. We can debate
this is definitely
it's
what
really,
we should be spending our time on.
It's seeing the guys back, watching them show up, and everybody, you just, that energy is palpable on report day. And one of the things that's exciting going into this year is it's guys There are very few, really got to, learn this guy. I mean, very few new faces with so much continuity. But those additions that there have been, you're really excited to see what they do. And I do think having so much of that familiarity, you will see the benefit to that, and that will be immediately evident when they get out to practice on Thursday.
Yeah. Loaded up podcast here today, as always. Coming up in just a few minutes, JJ Stankevitz caught up with Nate Tice from Yahoo Sports to break down Anthony Richardson's health, Shane Steichen in year number 2, and the overall potential of this offense going into 2024. So you want to stick around for that. Also, too, the Colts Audio Network is going to be throwing fireballs at you really starting this week. We've got the official podcast that's going to come from training camp every Tuesday, so be sure you're in the routine of that. Then on Wednesday, starting next week, Inside Football with Rick Venturi is back. And then on Thursday, we're starting a new podcast. Thursdays, we're starting a podcast called The 2-Minute Drill, which is basically a look at what you missed, what the top storylines are from Colts training camp that week up until that point, and we'll have interviews with players on that podcast. So really looking forward to all the content we're throwing your way starting in the next couple of days. But we got to start with the headliner. My man Anthony Richardson over the weekend, or I guess last Thursday, I think it was, paid a little visit to Speedway High School, dropped off some new helmets for those young lads down there in Sparkplug, territory, if you will, but he declared he's ready to go.
What a way to start the Brickyard weekend over there in
100%.
Speedway, right?
They have the greatest, I would say, high school nickname in the state of Indiana.
It's
Could not
outstanding.
agree
The Speedway
more.
Spark. I'm a big believer, tangent here, big believer that your team or your high school mascot, it's got to be indigenous to where you're from or have some sort of
something
meaning.
identifiable to your
backing
community.
up where
Yes.
you are,
Yeah.
right? So they just nailed it. Whenever I think in the 60s or 50s when Speedway High School opened up, Spark Plugs
Was
was
there
right
like
on
a
the money.
contest? Like, I need a little history on this. Was it like, name the new Speedway High School, and like
Probably.
somebody came in with spark plugs, and they're like, well, all
Yeah.
other submissions are unnecessary.
Might have been racers or
Yeah.
pacers,
Yeah, right?
or could have been snake pits.
All this is doing is making me feel like Carmel's got to ditch the Greyhounds. It's gonna be the Carmel Roundabouts.
A roundabout, yeah. If they're ever going to redistrict the new high school in Carmel's
build a
going to
new
be
high
the
school in
roundabouts.
Carmel, call them the Roundabouts.
All right, but Anthony Richardson in that media scrum, if you will, because it was open to the media, documenting the great moment. He said he's ready to go, and that's kind of, for my money, JJ, it kind of squashes any sort of hesitation or reservation there was towards the end of the spring when they shut him down for just a couple of days with that shoulder.
I mean, it wasn't even a couple days. It was one day that he got shut down for, and then it was like, everything we heard coming off of that last practice of vet minicamp was that if we had a game Sunday, he'd be playing. That he's going to be fine. Chris Ballard went on a podcast in the summer. He said he's fine. We heard from Anthony. And then Michael Pitman Jr. posted an Instagram video of all the players who kind of got together and worked out in, I think it was California. And in there's Anthony slinging it, on a field somewhere out there.
And Pitt was the one who orchestrated this whole thing, too.
I think that's 2 years running now he's done this, which we can get into. I want to talk about Pitt later on this podcast. But with Anthony, he's like, this is what we expected. And it's sort of like, okay, good. We can just put that off to the side. We'll get probably one more round of questions on it on Wednesday when Chris Ballard talks to the media with training camp arrivals that day. And then Thursday, everyone's expecting we're going to see Anthony out there.
Yeah.
And that he'll be ready to go and he'll be slinging it out at Grand Park on Thursday morning.
Well, with that in mind, question for you both. Where do you anticipate seeing improvement from Anthony Richardson at the start of camp? And your baseline is going to be where he was at the start of camp last year as a rookie. And granted, last year he was kind of splitting time or splitting days, if you will, with Gardner Minshew. We all know he's not going to be doing that now with Joe Flacco. He is the franchise quarterback for this team. He is the future. He is the present. But with that also, where do you expect him to be tangibly and maybe intangibly, Larra? And what is a successful training camp for Anthony Richardson in the next couple of weeks?
A successful camp is not a lot of stop and go. It's not like we're having to ramp up and pull back and ramp up and pull back. It's, you're on that steady progression and, maybe he has a lighter day or whatever it is. But the way that the schedule is, you're not hammering guys too many days in a row.
I think there's only...
You don't get into the padded practices until that second week of practice, which is commonly what we have been able to see. To me, it's just keeping it very steady. No setbacks, none of that type of stop and go that would impede any type of progress or any of his progression with the rest of the offense. To me, that's central to it all. And then getting just valuable time, not only in the preseason games, but also in those 3 joint practices that you will have. I think preseason games are awesome. They're always a lot of fun. I really do put, though, a whole lot on what you see in the 2 joint practices at Grand Park with the Arizona Cardinals, watching him go up against another defense, and then what you'll see in Cincinnati when there's the joint practice with the Bengals that last week before that 3rd preseason game on Thursday night.
Let's not forget that Anthony last year only had, I believe, 2 back-to-back training camp practices as the Colts QB1.
And I think this year there's only, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I looked at the schedule correctly, there's only 4 instances where the Colts will practice back-to-back days.
Yeah, and there are no back-to-back-to-back.
Yeah, right.
That I believe is a change from last year. But I think that allows Anthony to, kind of like you said, Larra, maybe there won't need to be as many built-in, let's dial it back, because you got to walk through a day after a really physical full pad practice or something like that. But I think it's a really good opportunity for him to stack days, kind of that trope you hear all the time in training camp. You got to stack days. But with Anthony, if he has a frustrating day, okay, you can come back the next day and you're not dropping down to the second team. You have maybe a frustrating day with the first team, come back the next day with the first team, have a good day, kind of flush it like that. I want to see that sort of steady progression leading up into the season. To kind of answer the question you posed there, Matt, about what makes for a successful training camp, I really think it is that trend line. Like, you don't need Anthony to be just like guns blazing from the start, but when you get into those joint practices with the Cardinals toward the end of training camp, that's where you want to see this team kind of hitting on all cylinders. Anthony, going the right places with the football, making good decisions, and then you're doing it against a defense that you haven't been practicing against for a while. So those are going to be, I think those two practices are probably going to be as indicative as any days of what we might be able to see out of Anthony when the regular season
starts. And it's just such a good test because you're actually going up against somebody in a different jersey. It's a different defense. It's different personnel rather than, obviously, he's going to get great reps up against this Colts defense. But when you're able to switch it up and get some different looks, different teams, especially in the joint practice opportunities, 3 in total, those will be pretty significant.
Yeah, it's not Zaire Franklin and Julian Blackmon that know this offense like the back of their hand by – I mean, they've been here for a long time, but certainly here all of last year in the offseason workout program and during training camp, getting to witness firsthand what Shane Steichen and Jim Bob Cooter's offense looks like. I mean, they could probably check to the right call for Anthony Richardson based on the alignment. So your point is so well taken there. For me, too, just one final thing. I want to see the buzzword that we heard all spring long was for Anthony Richardson and the accelerated vision. I want to see those things show up in those joint practices. I want to see him going to the right place very quickly, chunk plays against those defenses from Arizona and from Cincinnati and that one joint practice down there.
And that came from Shane, was really the one when he was asked about what he's seeing from Anthony, and he talked about, the vision was something that Shane was really impressed with in terms of Anthony jumping right in. When you had that time in the spring and early part of the summer, that was something that he heavily emphasized.
Here's the other thing to just remember with Anthony Richardson is there are going to be those flash moments during training camp where you're like, my God, how did he make that throw?
Yeah.
Like the one he had to Alec Pierce last year, like in one of his first practices where he was rolling to his left and he slung it 60 yards downfield. Like those plays are going to happen and your eyes are going to pop out of your head when you see those. But the down-to-down stuff that maybe isn't as noticeable, where he zips a 5-yard out on time accurately in the right situation based on the read. Those are things that are maybe not going to be as noticeable.
But it's going to show progress.
But it's going to show progress. And those are things that, when we hear from Shane Steichen and Jim Bob Cooter and Cam Turner during training camp, they might say, hey, he's making these right decisions on time. He's doing these things right. That you may go to a practice and you're like, oh, I don't know, maybe he only had 1 or 2 highlight plays or he didn't have any highlight plays, but he could have still had a really good practice.
Yeah, and no turnovers. Right?
Yeah.
Those things show up, too.
Well,
no interceptions, going to the right place with the football.
The red zone's going to be big, too.
Sure.
Like when we get into those red zone drills, when you get on the mic and you announce, hey, we got a red zone drill coming up here.
And we all look forward to that.
Well, I always look forward to
I
it,
do.
personally.
Highlight my day.
Those are going to be so critical for this offense because last year the Colts were 10th in points scored per game. But they were bottom third of the league in red zone.
Great point. Situational football can be so much improved.
Yeah,
and third down, absolutely.
And think about it: if this offense was already 10th in points scored, but they weren't very efficient down in the red zone, that is a major opportunity for this offense to go even higher than where they were last year.
Yeah, kind of flirt with scoring about 30 points per game. So you both are just spot on. You want to see those things show up in the joint practices. You want to see them show up in preseason games as well. But Larra, how much does Anthony Richardson need to play in the preseason, considering coming back for this year? It's kind of like rookie year 2.0.
Okay, it's not an extensive amount of time, but it's getting into the routine of a game day and your warm-ups and going through.
And I think there's so much value in that.
I really do. I mean, I don't care if it's 2 series
100%.
That he plays. That's enough for me. It's really the process of it all being back in that environment, which he hasn't seen since, October of last year?
Right.
To me, that's huge. Getting all of that part of it down, into that routine, getting comfortable with guys, the whole pregame process, all of that to me is, so I want to see him suit up. I don't necessarily know that he needs to play into the second quarter or after halftime extensively. To me, yeah, maybe 2 drives or so, and I'm good.
I think whatever plan, Shane Steichen, Chris Ballard come up with is going to be very intentional. When it comes to Anthony, it's not just going to be sort of like, well, let's throw him out there. It's like, okay, we'll throw him out there with these plays, with these things to do.
Yeah.
If he does play at all. But I wonder how much value there is too in like the first time you're not wearing a red jersey being on not September 8th, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Like the first time you're out there, you can get hit. There is that, threat of getting hit. Not being in that season opener, not being that first snap where all of a sudden you got Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson screaming at you at Lucas Oil Stadium. Maybe there is some value in that.
Yeah,
And
agree.
I think when you look at it as a whole, you'll get the first preseason game at home. Then you'll have the joint practices. So those are 3 really significant opportunities within a short stretch of time.
Yep.
Because that first week is really tight there between preseason game 1 and preseason game 2. I guess shouldn't say like first week, but first week of games, right?
Yeah.
So I think that you'll see him play, I would, kind of just, this is just forecasting if we have the crystal ball, play preseason game 1, 2 joint practices. Then you don't really need to see anything that second preseason game necessarily in terms of suiting up and likely playing because you do so much work in the joint practices. That was a little bit of what we saw from Shane Steichen last year and his philosophy with all of the starters, not just the quarterback.
Yeah, that second game was kind of empty as far as the starters go.
Right.
You're
and
right.
then because then that next week you have the joint practice on the road plus a preseason game.
Right. And Anthony did play in that third preseason
Right.
game
He played about a
last
half.
year.
Yeah,
Right.
he did.
Yeah, played about a half against the
was
Eagles.
well after he was announced as the starting quarterback as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So all good takes right there. Let's continue this conversation more on Anthony Richardson and the potential of this Colts offense in year number 2 under Shane Steichen. JJ Stankevitz caught up with Nate Tice from Yahoo Sports. He's an offensive guru and a football analyst. Here's that conversation.
All right, it is my pleasure to be joined here on the official Colts podcast by Nate Tice, staff writer at Yahoo Sports. You can read his stuff, you can watch his stuff over at Yahoo. One of my personal favorite NFL analysts, and not because he's just a huge fan of Anthony Richardson and Shane Steichen. Nate, welcome to the podcast, man.
I'm sure that gets me through the door, or helps me like keep the invite open. Yeah, just all right. He says some nice things still. Okay, yeah, he can keep coming on. No, but I'm super happy to be here. I know we've kind of been trying to get together and to do something together, do a show or something. And so very, very fired up to talk about the Colts, of course.
So with this Colts team, you kind of got this glimpse of what Anthony Richardson could be a year ago. And I love following you on Twitter. You can follow Nate on Twitter or X or whatever it's called at Nate_Tice. Because it's like every couple of months, I just see like you put that clip, the all 22 of Anthony Richardson, just like pinning a 20 to 22-yard strike on Josh Downs' shoulder over the middle and just being like, oh my God. Like when you look at that glimpse that the Colts got of Anthony Richardson a year ago, what stands out about maybe some of the sustainable things that you saw out of him, even in just 4 games that he played in 2023?
Yeah, what's really fun with Anthony Richardson outside of being like a, 99.999, well, maybe 100 percentile athlete, let's just call it what it is that he just really wants to do the right thing as a quarterback. And I'm not saying like, show up on time for meetings. I'm saying probably put in all the extra work that he probably puts in. Because why that shows up, and I assume he's a hard worker, is because how he plays. He is way more calm and way more of a pocket quarterback that can move around the pocket and get throws off and looks to push the ball and like in the offense, not as much as ad-libbing or, jazz play as a lot of these other quarterbacks like the Mahomeses of the world do, but really doing that traditional pocket passing that I think we all like. And I think is kind of not have been associated with Anthony so far. And I think it should be, because even at Florida, he tried to play like this, but even last year in that glimpses of 4-ish games, really a smattering of 2 games and change, 3 games and change because of the injuries, was that this is a guy that wants to do the advanced stuff and already shows a feel for it, which is amazing because he's so young and it's in a package that's so extremely, the tangibles are extremely high, but I think his intangibles really show up when you watch him on film and see that calmness when he plays with. And I think that is just so exciting. And I think that's why you see me post his clips and maybe a few other, what I call S-tier throws high end throws is because, especially after watching a lot of college football for the draft, kind of getting, watching a lot of mesh, a lot of RPOs, a lot of bad defense and offensive line play, watching some high end quarterback play, which I think Anthony Richardson is capable of. It's some nice mouthwash for me to get out of the draft season.
Something that stood out to me when we had a chance to talk with Shane Steichen this offseason about Anthony's, he talked about this one play against Tennessee where Josh Downs came in jet motion from right to left, and Tennessee never covered him. They didn't pull a guy in coverage, and the play didn't call for Anthony Richardson to even look that way. But he took the snap and he immediately got the ball to Downs. It was like a 10-yard gain in week 5. And the play called for him to go read out. I think it was maybe a post to Michael Pitman. It was like a high-low on the right side. He instead took the snap. He said, hey, no one's covering him. I'm just going to give him the ball. As somebody who's played quarterback, who's been, around NFL teams, who studies this game, to have a quarterback, even as a rookie, who can just feel the game like that, is that remarkable? Is that notable? Like, how do you kind of digest a play like that gets a coach really excited, but otherwise fans might say, well, it's an easy throw. He just dumped it off to the open guy. Like, how do you kind of digest that skill that Anthony has?
I think we're seeing a little bit more with quarterbacks now is you got to be a football player. You got to play football. You can't be everything just totally on script and 1, 2, 3. And yes, we'd love seeing efficient play and efficient timing and everything, which you still have to have as a high end quarterback, but you have to be able to ad lib and be able to just read the game out. I think that shows Anthony's. We always want to talk about arm arrogance and arm confidence and everything. I think this is just mental confidence. That's him trusting that he can do that within the realms of the play. You'll see freshman quarterback come in there and not understand how rules work, throwing the ball away and things like that. But it shows that he's like, yeah, I can do this within the realms of this play, even if it's not what it's called. I mean, Mahomes does that all the time, and other guys do that a few times. Also probably just shows that he understands. You see a lot of quarterbacks improve in leaps and bounds when the mental side slows down. And you hear that about athletes all the time. Some guys, it happens later. Some guys, it's when they're in college. Some guys, it's before college, like Peyton Manning probably. And some guys, it's right when they enter the NFL or something of that. I'm talking about every sport too, though. And I think when the mental confidence gets there and it starts slowing down mentally, then everything else slows down. The footwork slows down. The processing slows down for them, or speeds up, I should say, in a good way. You see a guy like Josh Allen. I think a lot was made about his mechanical work, which there was some tightening up his footwork. I thought a lot those positives came from his mental side, slowed down and understand the game better. And then that led to him slowing everything else down. His footwork slows down. Then he's able to anticipate and throw. And I think that's why it's encouraging with Anthony is that play and other plays that he throws, it's getting quicker. You don't do that unless you're anticipating, because the stuff just happens too fast, even with his strong arm and being able to do all those things. I know it was a shorter throw and all that, but it's just being able to do all those things physically. It's the mental side has to let you access that physical side. And I think that's what's cool is that's a perfect example. There's another play against the Jaguars that I loved. He beat a blitz that the Jaguars sent. And I think actually the Jaguars were kind of wrong on it. And that's why a guy came free. And he you could see him start looking left and recognize the blitz and then replace it for a first down. I want to say it was like in the first or second quarter there. So
that's early Josh Downs.
Yes. Yeah. It was Josh Downs to the right slot, about slant route, third down. I got him into the red zone, I think. But a play like that, and that was, correct me if I'm wrong, it was the Jaguars game week 1.
Yep.
So replacing blitzes in your first ever NFL start is 2 thumbs up stuff like that. That's what I think some guys get associated with that. CJ Stroud, of course, had a phenomenal season, but I think some guys get typecasted at, oh, he's a big athlete. Oh, he got hurt that way and everything. But all these little things that he's doing, these are the things that add up. And this is what is building the path, I think, to good play. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I'm very excited if you can't tell.
I think this is such an interesting discussion because, we all remember the highlights. You remember him hitting Alec Pierce 38 yards downfield with Aaron Donald wrapping him up. Yeah. Like just the insane throws, like you said, the S-tier throws. But like being a good quarterback, you can only have a couple of those per game. If you're one of the elite of the elite, you're still going to have 25, 30, 35 dropbacks in a game that you have to do the little things at. Like, how do you balance the highlight, oh my God, he can make that throw, versus those little things where it looks easy. He replaces a blitzer. He throws to the open guy. Just that that natural quarterbacking feel versus the elite playmaking ability he has.
I'm a guy that kind of chases the ceiling when I evaluate quarterbacks, and that I think would if you just again just painted a picture what Anthony Richardson is, obviously that would just lead to me why I liked him. But again, this is leading into the nickel and diming, the hitting singles and doubles, getting on base. That again, that's why I think Anthony has kind of showed flashes of. There's plays where he's checking the ball down within the rhythm of the offense, and it's not him guessing for the check down. It's going, oh, that's not open down the field, and then checking down. There's always improvements you want to see with just maybe a half second quicker. But I think that's the thing is you only got glimpses of 3-ish, 4 games, so it's not like you get to see it. Oh, week 14, we get to see it even better. But I think I'm early on in a guy's career before they reach, I would say 50 starts. And that's a number I always come back to. So that's about what, 4 seasons, three seasons in, that you can really start getting the, where that's where I want to see the more. If that guy's not nickel and diming, if that guy's not hitting the singles and doubles, that's where I would start to get worried. This is not to bring him into this, but maybe with Jalen Hurts, maybe sometimes I'm a little lower on him than others, is because I still haven't seen him attain that higher efficiency along with the explosives, even if maybe some of the stats are there. I just don't see it with some of those down to down play. But I think that's what you want to see later. But I would rather see the high end traits, the S tier throws, the 0.01% throws, because you can't teach those. You can't teach that mindset. You can't teach that arm. I still think the Rams Colts game last year was one of the most fun games in the entire NFL season because of what we saw those two quarterbacks do. And there's only a few guys there's a lot of good quarterbacks right now. I really do believe that, but there's only a few guys that are throwing it like that, that are able to achieve those throws, not even try them. It's not the numerator, the top number of, oh, the guy did it twice in the season. It's how many times they can even try the denominator. These guys are trying it 5 times a game, like you said, 4 times a game. Other quarterbacks, that's once every 8 weeks. I played with Russell Wilson. Maybe he doesn't throw like this, but he still had so many great gifts. When I backed him up, he could throw things I wouldn't even fathom because I knew my limitations. That's what I think is so cool with that. But getting back to your kind of original point, I'd rather see that early on and then get to the down play, because I think that's more about coaching, system, confidence in the offense, confidence in what the scheme is, yada, yada, yada. So I think sometimes that's where I have a disconnect with maybe some talent evaluators, where I think they see that the guys are more polished and they go, oh, but that looks like an NFL quarterback. It's like, well, yeah, but that's because it's more teachable because it's more about what's the system around him and the offense around him and how he reads the game out. So I'd much rather chase the high end stuff and then build the stuff below him, because that's just so much harder to teach. It's so much harder to achieve.
I think one of the bigger disappointments about Anthony Richardson's rookie season is that we didn't get to see Shane Steichen evolve with Anthony in year 1. We kind of saw it come to an end, obviously, in week 5. Where do you, Nate Tice, think Shane Steichen can evolve this offense now that there is film on Anthony? Evolve this offense to continue to make it a conducive environment for Anthony Richardson to be a quality, if not better than that, NFL quarterback.
Yeah, some of with Steichen when he was with I'll just first off start huge fan of Steichen. I consider him one of the higher end play callers in the entire NFL. I really do say that, not just because I'm on a Colts pod, but you can hear me on a lot of pods where I think he's top 6 if I had to rake him out. But he's a little different than what's kind of in vogue right now, which is that not a lot of motion, not a lot of shifting, a lot of same formations, same personnel groupings, preferences, types of those things. I'm fine with it because actually him and I kind of have some of the same formation or kind of offensive DNA. He's a North Turner guy. He's had a lot of offensive influences, but there's a lot of North Turner stuff to his offensive stuff, and same with me. So I recognize a lot what he does. And what's kind of cool about it is that it's a lot of all answer concepts, meaning no matter what the defense does, there's going to be an answer on the concept. It's not so much we're running this to beat man only. This has an answer to cover 2, man, cover 3. Puts a little more on the quarterback because they have to get to the spot, puts usually a little bit more on the protection because you need time in those things. So some of his features can seem like a bug. So I want to say that sometimes it'll be frustrating when you'll see at the stat. Maybe you'll see sometimes you're like, hey, maybe put a little bit more motion on that. It's what the offense is. So maybe my whole point is what I want to see is maybe sprinkle in maybe 2 more formations, maybe just to kind of change things up just a little bit on it. But I'm not going to tell a guy I'm not in a place to tell Steichen. I think he does great stuff and I recognize it. I think it's very sound. So this is like a long point of saying it's like, you're not really adding much to whatever I think schematically. I think it would be more of a coaching emphasis to Anthony Richardson is that, save his body, which I think is the obvious. I think we all know that. Don't take so many shots. And even some of the shots he did take and the ones they got hurt on were kind of freaky, kind of just he got hurt on a touchdown as he's like flipping in, like as he's like kind of quasi celebrating. Like you can't predict that. So I would say maybe some of that. I would say also just overall it's personnel too. I think some of this offensive system, I think this is where AD Mitchell can thrive in an offense like this. That's going to have him run a lot of stuff that will look the same originally. Like he will have a nice kind of launch pad, I think, to launch from because this offensive system and what it asks of their receivers. He's probably gonna have a defined role. I think that's my best way to shorthand it. So kind of just a all-encompassing thing here where I think the personnel is coming together. I think Steichen, he had to go with Gardner Minshew last year because of Richardson getting hurt. And it led to heavy RPO offense, which is good. And I think that's what's cool is Steichen can shift to that and mold to that. So what I'm excited to see, I don't know if I gave you an answer at any of this. This is just my whole breakdown of the whole thing is I'm pretty excited to see this offense. I actually am like, they're a dark horse kind of top 5 offense to me because I just think the personnel is a little bit better. I liked what the offensive line improved. I think Richardson's going to improve by leaps and bounds. And I like the receivers and the tight ends. I think it's a fun combination. So, and I like the scheme. So long-winded way to say like not much really. I think I would like offer as an opinion. If you want to get like nitpicky, maybe a little bit more motion. I would think that would just be it. But that's just very, very nitpicky stuff.
Explain to me, like I'm in 5th grade, why Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson in a backfield coached by Shane Steichen could be extremely difficult for opposing defenses to defend.
Because, well, just look at the Richardson scoring those 2 scores against the Texans, which was pretty fun on back-to-back plays. Okay, and that was without Jonathan Taylor. That was before this whole offense was weaponized, it felt like, before anything. And that's when we just saw those glimpses, and it was like, oh, and then it just kind of got pulled out from under us. I think what's exciting about this pairing is it's not a thunder and thunder. It's not a lightning and lightning. It's 2 guys that are both explosive and have size. That's exciting because you don't have runs taken away from you. Runs being like concept wise, they can run a little bit of everything. They go between the tackles. They can hit outside, so you can invert things. You can have Taylor being the outside guy with Richardson going up the middle. After I just said he shouldn't take so many shots, but just stick with me here. This is just in theory. If it's 4th and 1 for the ball game, you can do it. Okay. So, but those types of things, Taylor can go up the middle, JT can go up the middle, Richardson can go to the outside. Like that's their traits unlock a lot of things. It opens up the entire menu. And when you got a coach who I think is phenomenal in the red zone, because of just making everything look the same, but then having just little tweaks. Like I think that's what's so cool is like, and just watch the Colts offense inside the 5-yard line. I think it's just very, very cool that they'll run basically the same play, but then run like 5 different variations of RPOs with there. And that's what the variety is. But it messes with defenses. Just that little twist. It's easy on the offense. It's easy learning, but it messes with defenses. So if you're taking maybe these same runs, they can spam the same run over and over. But because it's a read play with Taylor and Richardson, it's just going to affect the defense over and over where no matter what, they're going to guess wrong. I think that's just what I'm excited for is that the whole menu is open and it's with a coach that knows how to use the whole menu. So yeah, it's a guy that's gone to Cheesecake Factory once or twice. And he's like, okay, I know what I like. I know what I like. I know the whole thing. I know one of every section. I know what I like, but that's exactly what I'm picturing this run game looking like.
Give me, as you've kind of dove into the Colts and, we talk a lot about Richardson, Taylor, Steichen. Give me a guy on this team who, when you talk about the Colts nationally, you bring him up and maybe he doesn't have the national recognition of those guys who you're like kind of pounding the table for like, hey, this guy's really good. You should keep an eye on this guy.
Oh boy. I've always been partial to Kylan Granson. But he's a role player. I know what he is. I think we all do. But that's one that I've always kind of just been like, yeah, that's a guy I've liked. I don't know. AD Mitchell, I was very high on this draft process because I just think I know he hasn't stepped on the NFL field yet, but he has traits that, again, just like Richardson, they're hard to teach. Like he moves differently. So, and I think he's in a good offensive ecosystem as far as coach, as far as the quarterback, as far as his position coach. I think that matters a lot. And that's what mattered a lot to him. So like, he's a guy that nationally I've been like, I understand the risk reward of him, but I think the reward is so great that I'm excited. And I think he ended up in a perfect landing spot. So other guys that maybe I'm like a little higher on, I liked Evan Hull coming out of Northwestern. He got hurt last year, but I really liked him, especially with the Colts because of his balance with JT, with Jonathan Taylor. He's a great kind of 3-down back, is a great protection back. He has great hands, great on screens. He was like awesome at Northwestern on screen plays. I know that's very niche, but he was, trust me. But I really liked him. I ended up becoming a pretty big fan of him in the draft process. I think he went about, I had a 4th round grade. I'm going to 5th round, but that's someone that's kind of he's a fun role player that got hurt. He got hurt last year, but I'm excited to see if he can hit the field this year, just kind of carve out that role for him.
See, this is why I like listening to you talk about the Colts, because a lot of national folks will just be like, "Hey, you're the big guys, whatever." You're talking about Kylan Granson and Evan Hull. Evan Hull had 1 carry for 6 yards last year, or 1 catch for 6 yards. But you're like, I really like him coming out. That's great. Like, you clearly do your research.
I do. Yeah. I mean, I know. And I know stuff happening off the field, but Drew Ogletree is another guy that flashed a lot, like when he's been on the field. So like, that's another guy that's how the Colts always have been for me. It's just like they're they have a lot of these guys, these role guys, and that I really like, and these kind of like 2nd tier guys. I mean this as a compliment, but no, I really like it.
This is a team that's got like 14 or 15 of our games are 1 p.m. games. So like, we're the league pass team, right? Like the ultimate league pass team.
The multi-view now, the YouTube TV
Yes.
multi-view, which has been an absolute game changer. I am not sponsored by them, but I would just, just an absolute life changer is YouTube TV.
Nate, I want to get you out of here on this. And I've asked a couple of folks this when I've had them on the podcast. What's one narrative about offensive football that kind of is accepted as fact that makes you feel like you're taking crazy pills?
That interceptions are bad, that all interceptions are like the same. Like that would be the second line there is actually what I mean. All interceptions are the same. And I feel like we're watching all these interceptions happen, and then we just act like people will just ignore what's literally happening right in front of our face, depending on their argument. I understand why it happens, but there's a lot of times where I feel like I go insane. That would be one. That all these interceptions are exactly the same. And that's why it's like, 2 years ago was the Dak Prescott thing. He's throwing all these interceptions, all this, and then if you watch it one after another, it's like tip ball, offensive player dropping it and then go flying in the air. Like, so it's just those types of things. I would say that's one. Now you're gonna have my brain cycling on this one a lot, because I do.
That sounded like a commentary. Hard. That sounded like a commentary on Trevor Lawrence to me, is what you just said.
Oh, that was another. Oh, yes. Oh, people that just look at turnovers. Yeah, that's another thing too. Just there's a completion percentage is another one. Offensive quarterback stats maybe is not the end all be all. And I know even some of the efficiency and as we've gotten advanced stats with success rate and EPA and all those types of things, expected points added, even those you have to take with a grain of salt. Like that's how we have to combine it. It's puzzle pieces. We combine what we're watching. So yeah, all turnovers are the same. It drives me nuts. People get in arguments about completion percentage with me. So-and-so threw for 72, or Anthony Richardson is actually the best. Like this was my number one example of this. Even when he's at Florida, everyone's just bringing up completion percentage to me. And I was like, yeah, but he's throwing it 40 yards down the field. That like, those are going to be high completion throws. Like the other guy's throwing it 2 yards. That's why it's different. So yeah, thank you for letting me go on a rant. I was trying to be all nice and sweet, and now I'm rambling. I love that. Now I'm rambling like a madman.
So if you're advising people on stats to take seriously for quarterbacks, does it vary quarterback to quarterback, or like what do you look at as it's not going to be an end all be all, right? Yeah. But it's going to be like just give me like a sledgehammer of this guy's good or not statistic.
Straight drop back, so no play actions. So this is like, just if you have the advanced filters, you can do this. Sports Info Solutions, you can probably do this on this there. Straight drop back, so no play action, no RPO, straight drop back, success rate. That's the one usually you can kind of filter out some, and there's still going to be noise in there, just because of a attempt, and you have to boost up how many attempts they have and how many dropbacks they have. But that one, because that is a quarterback operating like a quarterback, like how we think it. That is him getting the ball, dropping straight back, reading the whole play out, and firing it over there, making decisions, pushing the ball, firing for first downs. Because success rate is not just going to be yards. So if you get 12 yards on 3rd and 18, not successful. But if you get 8 yards on 1st and 10, successful. And so that's what I kind of look at. I would say the best example of that would be Justin Herbert against the Vikings this last year. Brian Flores, the defense coordinator, kind of doesn't let you do play action, kind of doesn't let you do a lot of things. You have to kind of be a real quarterback against him. So that's why good quarterbacks did good against them and bad ones didn't. And watching Justin Herbert against that defense last year was like, that's what I mean. It's like, that's the stat. And that's because all he did was drop straight back and fire the pigskin all over the yard. So, and that's what, again, tied all back. That's what Richardson could do. And that's what I'm excited about. That's why he is very more real than people are making him out to be. And I think people are going to get exposed to that this year.
Well, that is a great end to, Nate, what has been a really fun conversation with you here, talking Colts and the official Colts podcast, where you can follow all Nate's work on Twitter at Nate_Tice, and read him and watch him and listen to him on Yahoo Sports. Nate, thank you so much again for taking the time here.
Thank you so much for having me. Ton of fun.
Always wonderful insight right there from Nate Tice, Yahoo Sports. He might be up at training camp a couple days.
I asked him after he's not able to make it out to Colts camp, which is a bummer because like he would just be. I feel like the way that he consumes Colts film, he would just be like squealing most of the time when he would just watch like whatever play is coming in and Anthony getting back there in the pocket. I just think you would just hear like squeals.
It'd be fun to have.
Oh, here it comes! Here it comes! Here it comes!
It would be fun to have him seated next to Rick, because Rick's always dialed in on the defense, right?
Yeah,
like Rick is so
great.
defensive heavy. So if you had Nate going like
just a lot of inaudible noises, like what was that? Was that a snort? I don't know. Run that back again.
I think the biggest thing that I took away is just like it's good to hear from a national analyst about like the little things that Anthony does. And I know Nate said in that interview, like he looks for the ceiling. Those S-tier throws that he talked about that not many quarterbacks can even attempt, that Anthony can get to. But just like those little things that how Anthony Richardson plays quarterback. Like I think nationally, I just sort of assume if you don't watch him every day, you're sort of like, yeah, he can run and he's got a strong arm. But if you actually watch Anthony Richardson play, he's got great pocket feel. He makes good decisions.
Right.
He is a better quarterback than I think people give him credit for. And it's good to hear someone else who maybe isn't as around him as much as we are share that opinion.
And hopefully the common fan this year understands more of that based on the way that Richardson plays.
And I think part of the reason for that, too, is at the point when he got injured, you really had only started to see them really peel open that playbook, too. You had not gotten into the depths of what he's capable of, because he was really just starting to like find that cadence, find his groove, find his stride within the offense, using the guys who he has around him, because he'd never been surrounded by this type of talent, right, in his career ever, which that's, common for a lot of quarterbacks coming out of college, with the exception of, really a handful of guys who have NFL draft talent at every level of their collegiate rosters, right?
Who's a great quarterback. I wasn't saying that derisively, but there's a difference there.
I understand that people might not be understanding the comprehension of it, because there's truly so much unknown, because it was that sample size of, man, this is really impressive what he's able to do. But we were just starting to get into scratching the surface of what Shane Steichen's playbook entails and what he can equip Anthony Richardson with.
I have been listening to some podcasts, just some like national podcasts lately, that have been like Anthony Richardson's a dark horse MVP candidate. And, the Colts are kind of this dark horse offense to be top 5 in the league. One interesting point, though, that I heard, this is from Aaron Schatz, who he did Football Outsiders, DVOA, all that stuff. He was on, I think it was Kevin Clark's podcast. And he sort of made a mention of, like, the Colts will go as far as Anthony Richardson takes them, but, like, his development, it's not like you can just snap your fingers and immediately expect him to be this great quarterback. It probably will take some time, because he is effectively a rookie in terms of his experience. So, like, while we're all excited and hyped about what Anthony Richardson can be, there is going to be a developmental curve that he's going to have to follow and navigate. That's something to just keep in mind, even as we are super excited about the kind of player he can be, the kind of offense that the Colts can be.
Yeah.
There probably still will be some bumps in the road because he's only started, 4 games in the NFL?
4 games. Yeah, he's played 17 games past high school. Mm-hmm. He played 173 snaps last year, but in those 173 snaps, he accounted for 7 touchdowns. Like, that's what should just give
ratio.
you.
That's good ratio.
That's what should just literally keep you on the edge of your seat as you watch these games next year for the Colts. All right, we're going to talk about a handful of other offensive issues or topics before we wrap this thing up and then get you on to training camp. Again, report day is on Wednesday, so that's tomorrow based on when you are listening and or watching this here podcast. All right, I am really eager to see how this whole thing shakes out with Adonai Mitchell, A.D. Mitchell, and Alec Pierce. Is there a battle between those two guys for wide receiver spot number 2? And what is the role? What do you see as the max potential or ceiling for Mitchell as a rookie?
Well, first of all, yeah, there is a battle. Like that's not just going to be handed to A.D. Mitchell. Alec Pierce played 98% of the Colts snaps.
It's crazy.
Last year,
yeah,
as kind of the X receiver in this offense. So, and A.D. Mitchell's going to have to earn it if he's going to be a weapon in this offense. He's going to have to earn it by competing with Alec Pierce. And also, Alec Pierce is not going to give that up, easily.
Yeah.
I think he's going to come in this year very motivated. We heard a lot of really positive things from Chris Ballard just about how Alec kind of handled the struggles of last year just with his mentality. But for A.D. Mitchell, we just talked about red zone. The way that this guy moves at 6'2", 205, and the hands that he has, that's just instant. You see an instant red zone weapon for me. The things he can do in that shorter area of the field, with the way that he gets out of his breaks, and the way that he can accelerate away from a defensive back are really exciting. Obviously, down the field, that's another threat that he has. In an offense that hopefully will try to push the ball downfield a little bit more than they were able to last year. I ceiling wise, it's tough to put a number on it.
Sure.
But, if you're looking at, a really high yards per reception average and a good amount of touchdowns, which I would say probably 6, 7, 8.
Wow, okay.
That's a really good year.
A really good
for A.D.
year.
Mitchell.
Yeah.
Really good year.
I think you're going to see really healthy competition between those guys. I think they're going to help bring out the best in one another and give Anthony Richardson the most options, just more options, more opportunities within the receiving game, especially, downfield explosive plays, all of that. And in just watching guys around the building, Alec Pierce was one of the most present guys around the building, over the course of, the weeks that they have had and all of that. And he's looked bigger to me too. It looks like that he is put on, a little bit of healthy muscle with that. And just thinking about too, what it will do for him in these last 2 years, think about the rotation of different quarterbacks who he has been alongside. That is, and he's still been able to, be a threat. But it's just, it's Matt Ryan to, and
a lot of quarterbacks who did not have the willingness or ability to throw the ball down.
And that's what
coordinators too.
That's so true.
Yeah.
And with that, think about just point to the Tennessee game and what he did in that game, in Nashville last year with Gardner Minshew, who doesn't have near the arm velocity of an Anthony Richardson. Obviously, Gardner won games for the Colts and is a really strong quarterback. Obviously competing for a starting position now in Vegas. But when you see Alec being that downfield threat, being an explosive weapon in the passing game with Gardner, I think that you should be really excited for insert Anthony Richardson as that quarterback and then see the position that puts Alec Pierce in, because when he gets those shots, he has, a good ratio, good percentage of coming up with them.
The other thing is, I don't think it has to be this binary either.
It's not one or other.
Right.
Either
Alec
or,
Pierce
yes.
and A.D. Mitchell can absolutely share time.
Coexist.
As the primary X receiver in this offense. You could have plays where you got AD in the slot. You can do different things. I think that was something that showed up last year with this Colts receiver core, is that they felt good about their top 3 with Pitman, Pierce, and Downs, but without Ashton Doolin and then without kind of another established guy down there, it did get thin after those top 3 guys.
Right.
And I think this year you go in with Ashton Doolin again, but now you got A.D. Mitchell, Anthony Gould as a guy who could potentially be a weapon as well.
Gadgety,
I think you have a better group of you have better depth
Sure.
there that you can tap into. So you maybe don't have to have your starting X receiver play 98% of the snaps like
Also,
Alec Pierce
the
did.
pure reliability of Alec Pierce that he has proven over these last 2 years, and typically, like, receivers can be somewhat volatile in those first 2 years with injury and all of that, and he has withstood so much just in purely being available through the course of 22 and 23.
Yeah, played over 1,000 snaps last year.
Yeah, there's no questioning AP's toughness. Like that dude he's going to show up and he's going to be ready to play every single game.
Yeah. Speaking of being ready to play, these tight ends have to be ready to play, ready to go, and start to kind of outduel one another at the beginning of camp right away, because I'm doing the roster construction going into camp here. As Larra said, there's so much familiarity and continuity coming back from last year to this year that I'm not saying like you can fill out the roster now, but you got a pretty good idea at a lot of positions. But with tight end, JJ, there's 5 guys right now that I'm having a hard time figuring out who's going to make that position. And dare I say the Colts keep 4, maybe 5 tight ends?
I think there's very much a scenario where they could keep 5.
I mean, that would be
But you gotta
unheard
earn it.
of in terms of other NFL teams in the last decade plus.
Right. But,
I
mean, it would take everyone earning it.
Yeah.
But I think the really interesting thing about that tight end room is that, there isn't a guy who you look at and you say, like, that guy's on the roster right now. Like, I think, you look at a guy like Mo Alley Cox, who's got the blocking ability, and, I believe he's in the last year of the contract extension that he signed a couple years ago. You're probably like, okay, maybe Mo's on the team. But beyond that, you have a lot of guys who you've invested draft capital in,
Sure,
but who haven't totally proven themselves in the NFL. You've seen flashes.
All on rookie deals, right?
All on rookie deals. You've
Yeah,
seen
that's what I was
flashes
just
from
checking,
Kylan
yeah.
Granson, Jelani Woods, Drew Ogletree, Will Mallory, but you haven't seen anything consistently yet. So that creates a really interesting competition there. I think there absolutely is a scenario where all 5 earn their way onto the roster.
The rest of the roster would have to be really healthy in order to keep 5 tight ends.
So and this kind of feeds into another competition, but at backup running back, I don't know if you're going to keep more than 3 running backs.
3, yeah.
And if you keep 3 running backs, 2 quarterbacks, that then opens you up to potentially be able to keep.
You
5
got some
tight ends.
flexibility,
but
right?
Then special teams has to go into it.
Sure.
We've seen a handful of those guys play on teams before, but that's totally wide open. And then Jelani Woods is the big wild card in that whole thing.
Yeah.
Who is the guy, or who are the guys that are the best fit for Anthony Richardson at that position? I think that's what's really interesting too, is you saw so much play and so much rotation last season between all of these guys with Gardner. And then, you saw early in the part of the season a few of those guys with big flashes, especially, guys like Jelani and Drew with what they were able to do and show. Or, sorry, not Jelani because of the injury. So not Jelani, but, Drew in particular, Mo in particular. So now it's kind of like everyone likes to draw just because of Shane's ties to Philly, like that Dallas Goedert, right? Like what that offense looked like with him at that position. Who becomes and emerges that go-to guy because of the skill set and the characteristics and the look within this offense? I think that's one of the things that's really intriguing too. It's almost like a blank slate, I think, across the board.
For everybody.
Yeah, for which one. So it isn't really necessarily like, oh, yeah, going into it, you think this or you think that. I think it's very open because you are going to have to see exactly what the vision of implementing these guys is with Anthony in this system.
I mean, there are a lot of guys who I wish we could have seen Anthony's chemistry grow with last year, but that little peek we got into what he can do with Kylan Granson, just like you see some.
Yes, what game was that?
I think there was a throw in the Rams game, I want to say.
That, yeah.
There was I think it was on
Houston,
4th down.
Yeah.
It was on 4th down that he hit Granson for a big game that set up, I believe, the game tying touchdown. And it's just like, I kind of feel like with his speed on some of those crossers, he's able to run. I love the idea of Granson there. Even thinking back to that Titans game where they kind of ran that, the Colts ran that razzle-dazzle play in Tennessee.
Yeah.
And it was kind of that throwback that hit Granson. It's like, you get Anthony on some of those throws. Like that could be really fascinating. And, Kylan Granson's been the Colts' most productive tight end over the last couple of years. But you're looking at 30 catches, a couple hundred yards,
right,
a touchdown.
Right.
It's not like you're hitting that where you look at it and you say that's a go-to guy. In this offense.
Yeah, the last big season from a Colts tight end was Jack Doyle in 2021. I mean, I can't remember a tight end having a substantial year in terms of production.
It's probably Ebron.
I
is
was
the one
going
that
to say
you're thinking
Ebron
back
was the
to,
other.
Well, Doyle and
Yeah.
Doyle in
2020 maybe with Doyle.
Yeah, I don't
I'd
think
have to go back and
2021 Doyle was still, he was such a good player that
Yeah.
year, but like
Yeah.
I have such like a soft spot for Jack Doyle.
Well, who doesn't?
Like, I mean, who doesn't?
Right.
But when I only had 1 year of him here in Indy before he retired, and that 1 year I remember watching how he was blocking on some of the run plays the Colts got to that year because of Jack Doyle.
Sure.
And just being like, my God, this guy's awesome.
Yeah.
Can't get enough of watching his film.
Certainly Jonathan Taylor had a big year, partly because of Jack Doyle's buy-in there. But, yeah, I mean, to put a bow on that conversation, the Colts are going to go heavy, 3 tight ends in terms of formations a lot this year. So you've got that to factor in. Plus, how do some of those guys factor in if they make the team and you keep 4 or 5 tight ends? How does that factor into special teams? Because those guys have to contribute. Where can they factor in with covering punts, covering the kicks with the new kickoff rule?
Special teams, I mean, that's another aspect of it, of like, how does the new kickoff rule impact your roster construction, which you kind of touched on last week. But, if you're looking at guys on kick returns who, it's basically a play, you probably want your best tacklers on the field, and those aren't always going to come from the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, you might see a lot of defensive starters out there.
Yeah,
I mean, to be honest with you, I think, it's going to evolve, and different teams are going to have a feeling out process with that. But I think to begin with, you might see some starting linebackers or backup linebackers out there covering those kicks in short proximity with the new rules there. All right. You guys did this last week on the defense. Let's do this to close out on the offense. Give me a veteran that we're not talking enough about. Give me a veteran that maybe is a little underappreciated, JJ, going into training camp that you're going to be always having your eye on.
This is where I wanted to talk about Michael Pittman Jr.
All right.
Like earlier in the podcast,
There you go.
I wanted to talk about him here because there's not much new with Michael Pittman Jr. on the field. We know he is a really accomplished wide receiver. He's got great hands. He's incredibly reliable. I think there's maybe a little more he can get to in terms of being a deep threat with an offense that will push it downfield a little bit more.
Right.
But training camp Michael Pittman is like one of my favorite players because this dude doesn't take crap from anyone. He's going to start. I remember like last year, Pitt told us when he was on the podcast that Reggie was going through the training camp schedule. Reggie Wayne, the wide receivers coach, obviously, and he was like, all right, and then we got the Bears coming in for joint practices, so we know Pitt's going to start a fight then, and just kind of like said it matter-of-factly and, kept moving on. But, like, that enforcer role that Michael Pittman Jr. has kind of embodied over the last couple of years, coming from a wide receiver, like, this dude blocks his butt off on running plays. He's not going to let you beat up one of his teammates in terms of, maybe playing a little bit after the whistle. Like, he's not going to stand for any of that. And then for all this coming from your most productive pass catcher is really impressive. And I think it sets a really good tone for this team that they're not going to be out-physicaled on that side of the ball. The offensive line obviously will set that tone in the trenches. But everywhere else, for Michael Pittman to do this, it's like, all right, everyone, you got to get to his level of physicality. And then that, the offensive line loves seeing Michael Pittman Jr. blocking the way that he does. If you're a tight end, hey, if Pitt's doing that, I gotta match that.
Yeah.
A running back, Jonathan Taylor, loves seeing Michael Pittman out there on the edge blocking for him. Like, he's such an important part of this offense, not just for what he does as a pass catcher.
Right.
And during training camp, I love the tone that he sets.
That's why, I mean, everybody during the free agency period with him getting franchise tag, Larry, was like, is he a number one? Is he worth it? He's worth it to this team. He is this team's
really
number one because he has more value, I think, to the Colts than maybe any other team because of all the details and the little things that he does that JJ chronicled. All right, appreciation tweet time from Larra. Who's your vet?
Well, it's the entire offensive line, for one. But central to that is Ryan Kelly. Anchoring that entire unit. He is the longest tenured Colt. He is all the recognition a lot of times goes to Quentin Nelson because he is so phenomenal at what he does, rightfully so. But truly, Ryan is like the heart and soul of that offensive line. And this offense is going to go as far as this offensive line sets them up for success to go. both, with Anthony Richardson and also with Jonathan Taylor. Run game, pass game, it's all running through that group in particular. Ryan Kelly being the guy to set Anthony Richardson up in what is a critical second year, kind of this extension of his rookie year. And yeah, it's that group for me, because I think that there are a lot of the guys who get the flash, right? And rightfully so, who are going to put on those spectacular plays. And the offensive line never seeks out that type of attention. But when you do have an offense that's looking to take those strides that it is looking to and needs to this year under, the leadership of Shane Steichen, with Anthony Richardson, the expectations that are there, with the offseason, that Michael Pitman Jr. had getting that extension, with what's there for Jonathan Taylor, right? And what the expectations are. This is, you don't want to necessarily, it's not like a prove it year, but when you think about last year, you get the contract done. He battled through injuries, this and that. Now it's, okay, let's not miss time. You should be returning to that 2022 type of form for a Jonathan Taylor, right? That's the bar that he has to achieve. All of those things happen and should happen because of the 5 guys right there up front, and that all centers with Ryan Kelly.
Couple things, because I think this is such a good point. You see a lot of teams go this route with young quarterbacks where you want to have a veteran center in there. The Chargers, when they had Justin Herbert, they immediately went out and got Corey Linsley from the Packers to go in there, because there's so much that's getting thrown at you as a quarterback in terms of disguised blitzes, disguised coverages. How do you ID the mic on this certain play and all that? And to have Ryan Kelly be able to just be in there, hey, I've played more games than anyone on this team.
There's nothing he hasn't seen.
Right.
And nothing that he hasn't seen with an array of quarterbacks.
Yes, right.
9 of them.
Yeah. So
at least.
Yeah, right. Probably more. I mean, there is nothing that Ryan Kelly is going to be surprised by in terms of what is getting thrown at the Colts from the opposing defense. The other thing I just want to touch on, because this is an offensive training camp preview, we should probably talk a little bit about Jonathan Taylor. Expectations for him internally are really high.
Sure.
They are really high, as well they should be, with the contract extension he got last year and the type of player the Colts know he is.
And what he did in Week 18 last year.
I mean,
well, see, so this was set up as who's the veteran that maybe there aren't questions or intrigue about the one. And I feel like there's a lot of intrigue about him. That's why I would kind of leave that, because there's tons of intrigue about him. But I think that the offensive line is something that we take for granted that you don't have to worry about it, right? Because of that unit, what they have done. We've talked so much about continuity, ad nauseum. But man, how much that means there up front with that core group.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of what it was is, if things go well, we shouldn't be talking about the offensive line after this point.
Right.
So this is the time to do it.
By the way, with JT, that game in Week 18 last year, it was his second game with 30 carries in which he averaged over 6 yards per attempt. There's only one other player to have multiple games to hit those marks, 30 carries, 6+ yards per attempt in the last 4 seasons. It's Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
Over the last, since 2000, there have only been 10 players to hit that in multiple games. Adrian Peterson, Derrick Henry, Fred Taylor, Marshall Faulk, Mike Anderson, Priest Holmes, Sean Alexander, Jamal Lewis, Le'Veon Bell, Derrick Henry, and Jonathan Taylor.
There it is. There it is.
Also, man,
keep the hype
how
going.
great was Priest Holmes, too?
Right?
Man, that is...
Remember that guy? He was awesome.
Unbelievable. That was... yes.
Sean Alexander.
Talk about
Sean Alexander.
MVP.
Oh.
Yeah.
Impact on special teams, too. That's what we're talking about there going into the season. And that's what it is keep the positivity going, because the last, image for a lot of people before training camp is the 23-19 setback, the win in your in game, lose at home to the Houston Texans, the rivalry there. And ever since then, Anthony Richardson coming back, he's healthy, a really successful spring by this team. He's healthy starting training camp. Just keep the positivity going and feel great about this team and the core and the continuity and all the starters coming back, all 11 on offense, all 11 on defense, all 5 offensive linemen coming back. There's just a lot of things to feel good about this team going into the season. That's why I'm so eager for training camp.
As well as Shane Steichen.
Sure, sure, of course.
Him being the head coach and play caller of this team, I think you should feel really, really good about going into year 2.
And for him not to go into it with a question of who is going to be my starting quarterback? What am I going to get out of this, rookie quarterback? Am I going to have Jonathan Taylor or am I not going to have Jonathan Taylor?
It was kind of a blank show last year in August.
Right,
if we're just being honest. A little bit of a blank show.
Right. And hey, like, yeah, I really like Michael Pitman, but what does this look like depending on who my, quarterback
Right.
is at that
Who knows
position?
what you have in Josh Downs?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, a lot of variables
and let's talk about it. Let's just get it out there so it happens. No major injuries in the month of August. Hopefully we're not talking about things that, we're not talking about timelines and 6 to 8 weeks and might be back for week 1. Let's have a smooth, all things considered, uneventful, productive training camp.
Yes,
so
exactly.
really looking forward to it. Those are our parting shots with JJ, Larra. I'm Matt Taylor. As we said, we are coming at you fast and furious starting this week. We got the podcast coming out on Tuesday. That's what you're watching and listening to here. And then starting next week, podcast Tuesday, we got Inside Football with Rick Venturi on Wednesday, and then the 2-Minute Drill podcast on Thursday. So boom, 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 football everywhere.
And just going back to the beginning of the show, something that I really look forward to about camp is this is the opportunity that we get to kind of be embedded with the fans a little bit, because on game day we're down on the field or up in the press box, or now we're with you guys, right? Like we're kind of right on the field,
and tell
coming
us
in
what
and out.
You think.
And
Throw stuff.
Come on by,
I love getting the energy from the fans, seeing everyone who shows up to watch practice, to hang out, to see players, all of that. I think that's one of the things that truly I feed off of that energy. That takes me basically to the bye week, right? All of that you soak in during training
That's a
camp.
lot of energy, because that's the late bye week this year. By the way, let's give you a shout out. You're going to be on NFL Network.
Oh,
for
JJ, you're so nice. Yeah.
Back Together weekend on Sunday.
Looking forward to it.
With your guy, Rhett Lewis.
Yes. How great is
about
that?
that?
A couple of Hoosiers. You might get some IU references, I'm sure. Try to keep it under 5 on the full day of coverage. But yeah, Back Together weekend happening across the league. This is something that's really neat. If you're watching NFL Network on Saturday and on Sunday, they will be dropping into each and every camp across the league. But on Sunday, Rhett Lewis will be out there live throughout the day. I'll hop on and we'll talk some football and talk about what we're looking forward to. And the great thing is, by that point, we will have had both those practices, Thursday, Saturday, and then the Sunday practice, which is one of those evening practices.
It's like 4 o'clock.
So when we're doing those later reports in the day, we'll have 3 days of work on the field. So that is where you'll really start to get a good vision of exactly what all this is shaping up to be. So yeah, excited for that.
Yeah.
So they're so kind to ask and to bring me back after doing it the last few years. And so we'll have some fun. It's, this is where I have to remember how to be on TV again. It's been a while, right?
I think you'll be all right.
Can I
we
do
don't
this?
do this podcast live.
You'll be all right. Yeah, you'll be
But
okay.
it's
like riding a
might as
bike.
well have done this live. There was nothing that we had to go back and edit yet. Because there's still
Just
a
wait.
minute left.
Just wait.
Just wait.
We'll screw it up here.
The outro here.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, it's like riding a bike for Larra Overton. And again, if you want to come to Colts camp, it is free most days. There is a $5 charge for some days, but that just covers some incidentals and parking and things like that. But we would love to see you up at Grant Park in Westfield. Again, Colts.com/camp has all the details and all the practice times. It is your one-stop shop for Colts camp. Again, for JJ, Larra, I'm Matt Taylor. Kevin Connors behind the cameras and the mics and the ones and twos. We appreciate KC for all that he does. And we can't wait to see you soon. Thanks for listening to the official Colts podcast on the Colts Audio Network.